Be informed, be inspired. Join us for the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show. Tune in and listen for both modern and ancient wisdom on all things maternity, parenting and sacred women's business, right here on the Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond show.
You're tuned to Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond, contemporary conversations where stories, science, traditions and new ideas meet. Our show is coming to you from the studios of Bay FM in Byron Bay and is broadcasting across Australia on the Community Radio Network. In this episode, we will be looking at the links between our family kitchen and food sustainability, how and where our food comes from, the impact we are having on the food chain, and how coming back to our roots, to a deeper connection with food, can do a world of good for ourselves, our families, communities, and the world around us. Our guest is Eva Perroni. Eva is a freelance researcher-writer who uses food as a window to explore social, environmental, cultural and spiritual matters. She holds a Master's in Development Studies from the University of Melbourne and has written for prominent thought leaders in the food, justice and sustainable farming sectors. She absolutely loves to cook and finds nothing more pleasurable than sharing food, good food and wine with others. Mother and PBB team member Meggie Danielson also features in parts of this interview. We hope you enjoy this episode of Pregnancy, Birth and Beyond. I'm Annalia Tia. In this part, Eva touches on the joys of the family kitchen, the art of attention, our deep connection to food as a way of sharing love and quality time with our loved ones, and honouring where our food has come from.
The kitchen is a space where women have come together for generations, particularly in cultures where there were feast days, or special occasions where these specialty foods were made. That was a place where women all convened, and in that space was a space for connection, for laughter and joy and love. But you've also got to think about like the energy and the dedication that these women put into creating these beautiful foods that then was shared with the community. Everyone kind of, there's the quintessential example of chicken soup being healing. It's not just the chicken and it's not just chicken broth and vegetables that's healing. It is the love and the care and the intent that your mother has put into that food. And, not to get too mystical, but that translates into the food itself and into the experience that you have with that food. Your mother's prepared that for you, that love and that intent to help you get better. And so, there are so many of these special recipes. I've got an Italian background, so I've spent some time with my grandmother in her kitchen learning like Easter biscuits and stuff like that. But Jewish women, there's so many specialty like religious and sacred Jewish foods where your understanding of how that food is, like we don't have any recipes, for example. We don't follow things by the grams and the stuff. It was about learning how the food feels, how it tastes, what it smells like, in relating to the food on all these other sensual elements, not just the intellectual, 200 grams of flour and 25 mils of water or whatever. And so this knowledge, this food knowledge, was passed down from generation to generation of women. And, what is more important than being able to feed your family and community? Like, it all comes down to food, really, at the end of the day. That's how we all survived. So, to view the kitchen can be this place that also radiates connection and love and, the art of attention, being able to slow down and be so embodied in a process, physically and sensually and, not just mentally but emotionally, to then create something to share with your family and community. I just think it's such a beautiful process. We can view food as a chore, we can view cooking as a chore, or we can view cooking as a way to share our love with one another. So sometimes I have to remind myself of that while I'm but you'll find people when they're really passionate about preparing food, they're peeling garlic with a sense of reverence. It's a gorgeous thing. You're engaging with something that's come out of the earth. And that's the other thing, all these other elements that have come into bringing that food to you. It's not, it's come from a seed that sprouted roots and sprouted leaves and has, absorbed the energy of the sun and the rain and engaged in this beautiful process of life, and then someone who cares about that has picked that from the earth and washed it for you and brought it to the market, and then you get to talk to that person and bring those things home, and you can just continue that whole process of life because you're then preparing something in a way that is giving your family nutrients to sustain them, So it's really this whole cyclical process, and that if you can't engage in those early steps, if you don't have the space to grow something or whatever, then engage with food in that later process. It's just as important, it's just as meaningful.
In this next part, mother of two Meggie Danielson asks Eva about weaving food sustainability back into our life. Where do you start? Eva discusses the true cost of food and gives us some insight into our relationship with food.
Food is the universal connection. We all have to eat. It's a universal language in that sense. People can share meals and not be able to speak the same language as one another, but you can still engage in that process of giving and receiving and connecting. I think the thing as well, just, as we just touched upon, is to not then make it such a big project that it then feels like a chore. So just being really realistic. If you want to start engaging your family in these healthier and more sustainable eating habits, then just pick something that you can commit to, even if it's something as little as, this is something that we might all take for granted, but the family dinner, that's something that is actually withering away in a lot of society. But it has so many aspects and benefits to it that go beyond just eating. Kids that engage in family dinners perform better at school. There are psychological benefits because it also ends up being a time that you can connect and share with your family how you're feeling and how the day's been and stuff like that. There's all these interrelated benefits that just come from taking that time to all sit together and share in a meal. So if all that you can commit to in the beginning is just that we all come and sit down at the table and we make that point to connect with ourselves, what we're eating and, each other, even if you haven't been able to prepare that, just start at these bite-sized, easily digestible chunks that you can then build on. You don't have to start a cracking veggie patch. You probably won't the first time. I know because I've tried. Gardening takes experimentation and patience and dedication, But you could quite easily start with a little herb garden, or a little greens barrel. And then every dinner you just go out and snip a few little things. You can take your kids and pick a bit of basil or whatever it is, even if it's just the garnish or the side salad to your meal. So yes, we don't have to turn, we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to start with these really small things. And once you start getting engaged in them, like, food is a rabbit hole. You just want to keep going, like, further and further down the rabbit hole. Once you start gardening, you want to garden more. Once, you start preparing food, you get excited about what new recipe you can try. So yeah, start small and build upon it, and from there, from little things, big things grow.
I'm curious about, like, really focusing right now, talking about the real benefit of food and connecting to food. And I'm wondering how it is that we still are always seeking
More.
the cheaper food.
We're
We're always seeking the stuff on sale that, I would buy that kind of really nice garnish for, but, it's just not how we're as consumers spending all of our paychecks and such a small percentage actually going to these experiences that are giving us this real benefit of connection to our families, to ourselves, to the planet that we live on.
Yeah, so there's quite a few things that come into the cost of food. The first thing is that the prices at the supermarket definitely do not adequately reflect the labour, the energy, the resources, the scale of effort that has gone into growing that food and bringing it to your supermarket shelf. Like, in a lot of cases nowadays, farmers are barely scraping by. And that's got a lot to do with this pressure, this downward pressure from supermarkets, to just squeeze the price of food lower and lower and lower. And they also simultaneously, market their food for the thing that you should be focused on, to be cheapness and convenience. So, you can think of any Coles ad, and it's the down ad. It's just always squeezing down prices further down. And now that's what we think we should be looking for in food. We should be looking for cheapness. Food should be cheaper. There's never been a time in history where food hasn't been as cheap as it is today. And not in sense of like the dollar and cents, but in the sense of the proportion of your income that's going towards food. So today's average in an industrialised society is that we spend maybe 15% of our income on food, whereas, a couple of generations ago that was 40 to 60%. So
It's a huge difference.
A huge difference. We're spending less on food than we ever have. But then in terms of the real...
We're expecting more.
But we're expecting more, yeah. In terms of the true cost of food, well, there's a lot of ways in which those costs have been externalised. So farmers generally will get a subsidy if they grow certain crops. A lot of the time that doesn't fall to your average fruit and vegetable. That's more like the major crops like wheat, soy, rice, corn, the things that make up the bulk or the base of most processed foods. Sugar, palm oil, that kind of stuff. Farmers usually get government incentives to grow those crops.
In part 3, we look at what is influencing our perception of food and food cost, and what is the impact of food production to the earth. Talking about what's influencing the content around us, both, there's the various realms, so the marketing aspect, which, the supermarkets are influencing how we perceive food, but also these global economies are influencing how we perceive access and understand food. And you know, that's, I think, an important part of the conversation, just as much as, you know, not so much as interaction wise, like we want to be weaving our more local in our homes kind of